Let's begin. Hello everyone and welcome to BHD Studios. Today we'll be talking about this lens right here, the Sirui 24mm f2.8 1.33 times anamorphic lens for stills photography. So this lens is meant for movies, it's meant for video, but I did an article for Fujilove. I did two articles for Fujilove, and so I'll put the links down below. This is the first one that Sirui sent to me just before the pandemic, and I took this with me to Hong Kong, and I did do an article on that in Fujilove, and great lens. And for those of you who don't know what an anamorphic lens is, basically it takes so whatever the format, so for Fujifilm X mount, it's a 2:3 aspect ratio sensor, and it squeezes everything in 1.33 times. So it's distorted, right? So when you get the picture, you look at it, everyone looks tall and thin, which necessarily isn't a bad thing, but it's not correct. And then in post, so in Photoshop, you de-squeeze it by 1.33 times. And so let's kind of do the math here a little bit. The Fujifilm, the current sensor is, if you work out the actual vertical and horizontal pixels, is 4160 vertically by 6240 horizontally. If you do 4160 by 6240, you get 26 megapixels, right? 26 million pixels. And so what this does is on the horizontal, the 6240 pixels, you times that by 1.33, which stretches it out to 8299. So now you got 4160 but 8299. You multiply that and you get virtually 35 megapixels. And if this is all kind of sounds mumbo jumbo, I have everything in my Fujilove article where I just take screenshots of Photoshop so you can see exactly what I'm doing. And so that's what you do with stills. With video, it's a little bit more complicated. You could use an app called Handbrake that allows you to change and manipulate the aspect ratio, and as well in Final Cut Pro and probably in Premiere Pro. I don't have Premiere Pro, but in Final Cut Pro as well, there's a way of de-squeezing, and just look it up on the YouTubes. I'm sure someone has explained it well. But for me, I did use Final Cut in a little video clip I'll put in here right now. And that is with the brand new XH2S, which allows you to shoot the entire sensor 4:6 aspect ratio. And when you de-squeeze it in post, you're getting close to a 2:1 aspect ratio instead of a 16:9, which is a little bit more square. Or you can shoot in the 16:9 video format, and it stretches it out to, I think they call it CinemaScope. 2.4 to 1, or like a 21:9 aspect ratio. But I love using the full sensor. I don't like cropping in, and so I think that's really cool that you can do that in stills on the XH2S. I'll embed photos throughout this video, but as well in my Fujilove article. This is the 50 again. It's lighter, it's a little smaller, and then if you want the 24mm field of view, so it's a little bit tricky because it's 24mm in terms of when it's squeezed, right? But when you de-squeeze it, you're getting maybe about an 17mm sort of like angle of view, left to right. It's about an 18mm. That's what you're getting, but it is a 24mm perspective, right? So if that makes any sense, I'll sort of put examples down below where I actually kind of A-B'd shots where I shot at around 18 or around 16, and then showed you the Sirui. Basically what's happening is, even though it's basically you're not getting so much sky and you're getting less foreground, which is typically how I like shooting. A lot of my pictures when I shoot, I tend to find, well, there's too much ground and there's too much sky. Why can't it just crop it? And I often do crop my stills, but with shooting with this, you don't need to do that. And with anamorphic lenses, you get more than just kind of a wide angle. There is an optical anomaly. There's a few of them. One of them is that anamorphic flare you get. So Christopher Nolan movies, you see that little blue line. It's such a cinematic thing, seeing that blue line flare, that sometimes even in animation they'll throw it in because it gives you that movie feel. But whenever you see that little blue line and there's little bubbles and little the oval bokeh flare, that's what happens when you use anamorphic lenses. And when you de-squeeze these images, the bokeh is still, for some odd reason, remains oval. And so that's kind of the cool thing. I had to use a flashlight to sort of force that flare and it was hard because it was on a tripod. I had to manually focus myself, and I thought it did a pretty good job, and it did different angles just to sort of show, depending on where the light is coming from, you can really sort of, if you're doing video, you can sort of pre-decide how much and what type of flare you want. I was by myself, so I had to take multiple shots and try to figure out what was the best. But just a lot of fun shooting with this, a lot of creative things you could do, even as a stills photographer. Couple of things here. There's no communication between the body and the lens, so you'd have to put in the custom settings what lens you're putting on here, because the Sirui does make the 24, 35, 50, and 75, and maybe they're adding more to the APS-C and Micro Four Thirds lenses. I think the Micro Four Thirds actually has more. They just started a full frame line and sort of a premium line of cinematic lenses. So Sirui, from the past 3 years, making I think the 50mm anamorphic was their first cinema lens that they made and it was special, right? Because it was under $1,000. Most of these things, just even like a decade ago, were in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then some third-party manufacturers started making them for like $30,000 or $40,000, and then it dropped to like $3,000 or $4,000. But this was kind of the price point where it went to under $1,000, and all these lenses for Fujifilm, this is a bit more expensive, but under $1,000, and these might even be on sale right now. For that price, being able to play around with something fun like this, I think it's great. Now, one of the negatives of this lens optically is, as I mentioned, it doesn't communicate, so there is quite a bit of distortion on the 24mm. 50mm is fine. This is a little bit of distortion. I wouldn't be so concerned about it, because every image that you shoot on an anamorphic lens, you have to kind of de-squeeze. You have to distort the image that you originally see, right? So every image, you have to take the horizontal and then de-squeeze. So since you're already in there manipulating, then in Photoshop, and again in my Fujifilm article, I go into details how to do that, to fix the barrel distortions anywhere between about +7 to +11. It depends on how many lines there are, and if it's very obvious. If you're shooting at an angle and you're shooting people's faces and nothing is clearly straight on, then you won't notice as much. But if it's straight on something, you could see like a bridge or something is supposed to be straight, that's starting to kind of have that barrel distortion, then you can fix it in post. And it's pretty easy to see, and you just kind of slide it across. And as I mentioned, I show exactly how to do it in my Fujilove article. And so overall, really happy with this lens. Thank you so much, Sirui, for sending it to me. Even though I'm not a videographer, using lenses like this to get that cinematic look, which is something I'm always looking for as a stills photographer. Most of my heroes aren't photographers, most of them are videographers, and I've always wanted to kind of shoot like Wong Kar-wai. I always wanted to have these cinematic Christopher Nolan kind of action shots, moody night scenes, and having a cinematic lens and having an anamorphic lens, which is quite unique to cinema, is a nice little trick that we can use. And for under $1,000, yeah, it's definitely a lot more steps involved to get these shots versus just dropping your files onto your computer and immediately sharing it. No, you can't do that with this. You got to kind of work these files. It's still a lot of fun, because the end result is you're getting these unique images that people are like, how did you do that? Well, you use a lens like this. So thank you so much, Sirui, for sending me this lens. Again, check out my Fujilove article. I know I keep on saying it, but it's a lot easier for me to explain maybe on stills. You can just kind of look at the stills and figure out how it's done. And yeah, if you have any questions, ask me them down below, and we will talk to you soon. Happy shooting. Still love this quiet shutter on the XH1. It's awesome. All right, peace.